The Academic Staff Union of Universities in Nigeria says it will appeal a court order directing it to suspend its 7-month strike. The union's counsel, Femi Falana, says it will file an appeal and a stay of execution on the judgment by the National Industrial Court of Nigeria. ASUU has been on strike since Valentine's Day. February the 14th is calling for improved funding for universities, a review of salaries for lecturers, and a change of the payment platform, among other issues. Several meetings between ASUU and the federal government have ended in a deadlock. Let's take a listen here.
Educational development has been halted, particularly in public universities in Nigeria, which ought not to be, because when that fundamental pillar on which development rests is halted for 7 months, it means the entire economic, the entire social development is also halted, which ought not to be. So what the court did was to agree with us that an interlocutory injunction has to be granted against the Academic Staff Union of Universities, their agents, privies, or whatever name they are described, from continuing with the strike pending the hearing and determination of the substantive suit. That's in accordance with rule of law.
Well, the judgment has come. It has come. The court has ruled that members of ASUU are restrained from continuing the strike action, and that they should return back to the classrooms pending the determination of the substantive suit. As per the next action, there are quite a number of options open to the union. We will study the ruling with the legal team, and then we will adopt the most appropriate option.
All right, joining us from our Abuja studio to react to this judgment from the court, as well as discuss education funding in higher institutions, is Professor Uche Uwaleke, who is the professor of capital markets at the Nassarawa State University in Keffi and president of the Association of Capital Market Academics of Nigeria. Professor, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. So, what's your reaction to what you just saw, as far as the motion that the decision, rather, from the ASUU's council to appeal?
Yeah, thank you, Rotus. Well, let me start by saying I'm delighted to be here. I think the court case is quite unfortunate. Well, ASUU is saying it's going on appeal, and that's, of course, on the basis of the fact that the decision of the industrial court is not final. We have higher courts in the land. I say it's unfortunate because negotiations have gone very far, to the best of my knowledge, and at a point when the government was expected to demonstrate goodwill, all of a sudden ASUU was taken to court. So I think the best way to resolve the matter right now is to allow the negotiations, to come to an end, of course, to allow that to happen, there's need to find a way of vacating the judgment or withdrawing the case. So my advice to the government is to withdraw the case to allow negotiations, to finish. As I said earlier on, negotiations had gone very far. The contentious issue, one of them, which has to do with the no work, no pay rule, government was being made to understand that it should reverse that again as a demonstration of goodwill, and that's because teaching is not just what academics do in the universities. The university system, runs on not only teaching, but academics also conduct research and community service. So, and if you try to even rank that or other that, some would argue that research is the primary function that academics perform. And as I speak to you, research hasn't been halted. What has been halted is just teaching. The other components of the work of an academic, they're still going on. As I speak to you, I still receive, on my mail, students' work. particularly my supervisees at the postgraduate level, master's and PhD level, they still send their work to me, to read. And I don't say because ASUU is on strike, I don't go through those projects or those theses or those dissertations. So I still do that, and I'm sure my colleagues are also doing that.
Great.
And as I speak to you too, academics are also publishing. We are still doing publications, also in conjunction with some of our mentees and supervisees. So research is still going on. And to say you won't pay arrears, of course, means you don't recognize that academics also teach. And by the way, even when academics go back to, lecturers go back to school resumes, the areas of work will still be done. Students will still be, graduated. Universities have a way of making up for lost grounds. So on the basis of that, I think it would make sense for government to, pay for those, areas that they are saying, they won't pay.
Okay.
So that's on the.
Great stuff.
On the one hand, if you also look at the issue of IPPIS, for example, what has become evident now is that the integrated payroll and personal information system is not foolproof. I think even by government's own admission, has a lot of flaws. When I say government's own admission, I'm referring to the position, I hope I'm right, of the Minister for Digital Communications. So who says that is not also foolproof? And that's why the university community is saying, let's have our own UTAS, which has been tested, which fits into what the universities do. I'm sure, Rotus, you read that recently the chairman of ICPC, Professor Bolaji, what's talking about people getting salaries for ghost workers, receiving salaries between January and June to the tune of 49 billion.
Right.
So that tells you that IPPIS is not foolproof, and universities are right by saying that they need their own UTAT. So to answer you directly, I think the case should be withdrawn. So that negotiations can be concluded. National Assembly has wedded in, as you know. Even the president too met with the pro-chancellors, has also wedded in and said he was going to consult and then, get back to the union. And then all of a sudden,
we have this case. All right, Professor, I want to quickly.
So I think it should be withdrawn.
Great stuff. Great stuff. I want to quickly get to funding. You wrote an article in, I think it was Business Day newspaper, where you said that the capital markets should be able to fund universities. Can you explain that to us with respect to how that's going to work?
Yes. I see. I was concerned about sustainable funding of universities because at the end of the day, what matters is sustainability. If we rely on government fully to fund tertiary education in Nigeria, of course, the risks are there. If tomorrow you have price shock, as we often do, and then government, is not having money to meet up with obligations, then that suffers. So there's a need for us to have sustainable way of funding universities, and one such way, in my view, can come from the the capital market. Well, I don't have all the answers, and which is why the umbrella body of the academic community in Nigeria, will be meeting later today to brainstorm and come up with viable solutions. That discussion will be led by the former DG of SEC, Dr. Suleiman Danusa, former chairman, and he was also a former pro-chancellor of IBB University, now an adjunct professor at NISA. So we intend to come up with a solution, a capital market solution to funding universities. And of course, when you hear capital market, it means long-term solutions. Now, in that article that I wrote, you will find there that I cited some countries where universities have approached the capital market. In US, for example, universities such as MIT, Harvard, have Yale, have at one time or the other approached the capital market for funds. Ditto for Canada. In UK, for example, in 2018, the Oxford University issued 750 million bonds at just 2.5%. For 100 years, that was the longest and the biggest, by any university. And guess what? It was oversubscribed, by as much as $3.6 billion. That was the offer that investors made for something of 750 million. So that tells you the level of confidence that investors have in such universities. And of course, the question here would be, if our universities go to the market to raise funds, would they get that kind of confidence? Well, if you know that in places like Mexico, for example, which you wouldn't call Mexico a developed country, they're also going to the market to raise funds. And in 2014, if I recall very well, the University of Melbourne in Australia also issued $250 billion bonds, to build hostels. Now, what we have in our country today, our universities today rely mainly on government appropriation. Of course, a number of them get grants, endowments, foundations, alumni activities. You also find some by way of IGR. You see them doing facilities rentals, farming, entrepreneurial activities, consultancy. Now, the point in that article is this. If there are revenue generating activities of universities, those revenue generating activities can be structured in such a way that will allow them become basis for raising the money from the capital market. It can be by way of a special purpose entity, an SPV, set up for that purpose, which I am confident that our first generation universities, for example, take ABU or Unibado or Nsukka, if they use such approaches or mechanisms, they should be able to leverage their goodwill and receive a lot of investing interest.
All
because
right.
As it is, all these ones I've mentioned, do not really aggregate to sufficient funds that universities were required to operate. Look at what has happened in the past. We've had a TED fund set up in 2011, okay, and recently too. Of course, TED fund interventions are usually in the area of infrastructure, research, and of course, training, staff development, but they don't cover salaries. Central Bank too has been intervening in the education sector. You're aware of the Centers of Excellence Central Bank has. You're aware of the tertiary institutions entrepreneurship scheme the Central Bank is doing. And the Central Bank has also, as part of its corporate social responsibility, has also been intervening in some institutions. My institution, for example, is one of them, where the same Central Bank has built a beautiful PG edifice. But these efforts need to be complemented. As I said, what's important is having it in a sustainable manner. I talked about setting up SPVs, trying to securitize, if you like, the revenue streams of these some of these activities in the university. The other one can also be by way of going to issue bonds backed by the government. If the government can back any bond that is issued by a university, that will also give it a lot of weight and will elicit a lot of investors' interest. After all, come to think of it, government did that in the case of banks. Government issued, through AMCOM, if you recall, issued bonds, okay, to be able to bail out a lot of banks having toxic assets. Today, that's over 5 trillion, is still there, with AMCOM. So if the government can do that for, private sector entities, like the banks, how much more, in relation to, education, and a sector that is very critical. So I think government can also back the issuance of bonds, call it agency bonds, for some of these universities, of course, to be able to have a sustainable way of funding them. So essentially, the capital market route will involve bonds, will involve, setting up SPVs. Of course, these revenue activities I talked about, can also become, can be funded through private placement. If a university, for example, knows that it has a bread making factory that is viable, or they're making table water, or whatever they're doing that they think can get revenue, A lot of universities today also run executive programs that are viable. Okay, all those ones can be used to also do private placement. You have individuals, high net worth individuals, investors that will invest in them.
Great ideas,
particularly
Professor.
members of the alumni.
Great ideas.
Yes, you heard the other day, I'm sure you read.
We've run out of time. But fantastic.
Yes,
we look forward to your meeting with the capital market academics and further, fleshing of these great ideas you've shared with us. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time, Professor Uwaleke.